Hey guys, it's Elise and welcome back to My Cupcake Addiction. Today we're going to be making a rainbow layer Instagram cake. It's fondant free, so easy to make, and it looks so cute. I just hit 400,000 followers on Instagram, so hi to all of you guys that follow me over there. And if you don't, I highly recommend you check out the My Cupcake Addiction Instagram. If you love everything that we do here on the YouTube channel, you're going to absolutely love pretty much everything cake, candy, sweets, desserts related. I like to say it's the sweetest place on Instagram. The things that you're going to need to make your surprise inside rainbow layer Instagram cake. I'm going to use a little bit of Nutella for the dark portion, but if you're allergic to nuts, you could also use dark chocolate ganache or milk chocolate ganache. I've got a batch of my famous perfectly pipeable buttercream frosting. I'm going to leave all of your ingredients and measurements and everything on the My Cupcake Addiction website, so you can go there to check out the recipe. I've also got some black candy melts. I've got an offset spatula and I've got a serrated knife. I've got some scissors, and for my rainbow today, I'm going to be using rainbow Twizzlers. If you don't have access to rainbow Twizzlers, you could use something like rolled out rainbow fondant, or you could use a rainbow candy strap. I've got some lovely bright food colorings, and I'm going to use packet vanilla mix today. I'm going to use packet mix because when you mix in this amount of color into a vanilla cake, it kind of tends to knock the air out of it a little bit. Those packet mixes, they're a little bit more robust and they can handle that additional mixing. Plus, you can mix them up one packet and one color at a time, so you don't have a whole bunch of mix just sitting there losing its air while you wait for each layer to cook. I've got a red layer, a green layer, a blue layer, and a yellow layer, a little bit of parchment or wax paper, and I've also sized an Instagram template, which works really well for an 8-inch cake, but you're gonna need to make it bigger or smaller if you decide to change the size of your Instagram cake. I'll leave a link to that down below. So I baked my cake layers in an 8-inch square cake tin. I used a single Australian cake mix, which normally makes about a 7-inch round cake, but I know in the US the cake mixes can be a little bigger. So your layers might just be a little higher, or you might be able to split out 3 instead of making all 4. I've got all of my layers and they are completely cooled. They can't be at all warm or they're gonna crumble when you try to carve them. And the first thing we're gonna do is we're just gonna carve them up and we're gonna take off any of the sort of top and bottom and expose the beautiful colors underneath and make them all a uniform size. So I'm gonna take a bread knife and I'm just gonna slice straight across. I'm gonna do this by eye, and sometimes it pays to get down eye level with your cake. And we're going to expose beautiful bright blue cake underneath. Make sure it's nice and even and as flat as possible. And then on the back of your cake, on the bottom, you're always gonna have like a little bit of just a cooked side. So you wanna take that off as well, but don't take too much cake off here. It's like a really, really thin layer that you wanna slice away to expose the blue. You wanna repeat that with all 4 of your colors, and we're gonna start layering with blue on the bottom. So with all of our little pieces of cake carved, and you should have a nice front side and a nice back side. Don't worry if you've got a little bit of edging, because we're actually gonna curve off those edges and give it a little trim to make it nice and square anyway, but make sure that you've got as much of that brown off the top and the bottom. Because I don't want blue crumbs through my white frosting, I'm doing a really thin crumb coat. So that's where I kind of like really press the spatula into the cake and trap any of those crumbs. You can see them kind of popping up into my frosting. I'm gonna wipe off my spatula because I don't want to send any of those blue crumbs going back into the white frosting. And now that I've kind of caught the main crumbs, then I'll just put a nice, even, white, crispy white layer of frosting. But don't go too crazy here because it's gonna be frosting on the outside, frosting on the inside, and we don't want that white line to be too thick in between our colored layers. On goes my green layer. And we'll repeat the process with the crumb coat and then the nice white coat of frosting in the middle. You want to stack that up. Next goes your yellow and finally your red. Don't worry about putting any of that frosting on top of the red at the moment. We just want to get all of them stacked, 3 lots of frosting and 4 layers of cake. Beautiful. Now I want to take that cake and I'm going to use my bread knife again, or a serrated knife. I always use serrated here because it gives you like a sawing motion. And I'm going to come in and I'm going to cut all down the sides of my layers so that I get rid of the brown edges on the sides, but also so that I get a perfectly even and evenly frosted square. Now, because our Instagram logo kind of has those rounded edges, you're gonna have to round off your edges here. I find it best just to start by actually cutting down, and you can see how firm these cakes are. When you make your own sponge recipe, it's kind of a little bit lighter and fluffier. Those packet mixes are usually a little bit denser and just a little bit easier to carve. If you find that your cake's crumbling a little bit too much here, you can just pop it in the freezer for about 10 minutes to let it firm up. Now I'm going to take my white frosting again and do a really, really light crumb coat all over the outside, and then this cake's going to go into the freezer for about 15 minutes. Be really, really gentle with your corners here. Treat them very carefully because you don't want to start losing chunks of corner or your Instagram logo is not going to be as neat as we want. That's gonna go off into the freezer for about 15 minutes because I really want that crumb coat to set so I don't pick up any crumbs at all when I put on my beautiful top coat. If you thought you were gonna get a chance to rest and relax while that cake's in the freezer, you are sadly mistaken. We still have work to do. So I've got my black candy melts and I've melted them down and popped them into my Ziploc bag. And I'm just gonna snip a nice little tiny tip off the corner to turn it into a bit of a makeshift piping bag. So I've used my Ziploc bag just to create the little black flash, and then I'm gonna take an unmelted candy melt and upside down I'm gonna stick it in to kind of create the little circle that goes inside the square. I wanna push that right down so it's kind of embedded in that black chocolate. And before that starts to melt too much, you wanna just run your finger around because you wanna make sure this is really, really nice and flat and sharp on the edges. Once you've done your little flash, then we can make our shutter. So I've got my larger piece of parchment paper, and make sure you don't drag that through your flash. And I'm gonna slide that over and then just make like a big round circle. To add in a bit of texture to our nice big round circle, I'm just dragging the bag through it and really just leaving almost like a bag mark or a little ripple to give it that sort of nice shutter effect and give it a bit of dimension. I'm gonna pop those both off into the fridge and I'm gonna let them completely set, and then we're gonna move on to our frosting. So your cake should be back from the fridge and it should be nice and firmly set, just that frosting on the outside. You don't necessarily have to freeze the whole cake, just the frosting. So I'm gonna take my Nutella now and I'm going to stir it through my vanilla buttercream to kind of give us that nice light brown color of the Instagram logo. Beautiful, so that's the color you should have, which is kind of gonna be our light brown, and then our straight Nutella is gonna be the dark brown. I'm gonna spoon a little bit of that on, and we're gonna do the bottom 2/3 of our cake in the light brown frosting. Using the offset spatula, I'm just gonna push it to either side. The one thing you want to be careful of here is you want to make sure the line between the two colored frostings is really neat, and you definitely want to start with the light brown frosting, not the Nutella, because that way the Nutella goes on second and you don't risk dragging Nutella through your nice light brown frosting. You want to pay particular attention here to really smooth your frosting out. I used my offset spatula to apply it, and then I used a ruler to give it a really nice smooth finish, and then I took my offset spatula again and I essentially cut into the very, very top and made like a little ridge that I can snuggle my Nutella up against so that I've got that really nice line. This is also your opportunity to even it up a little bit if you feel like one side's a little lower than the other. So now I'm gonna take my Nutella and I'm just gonna Nutella the top section. This should be easier because you've already kind of got the little marker all set out of where that Nutella is going to nestle up against, but you want to try to make sure that you're not dragging any of that light brown frosting back through the Nutella. So just try and apply it, particularly when you're close to the edges of the light brown frosting, in one go. Once again, just using my ruler to make that really nice and smooth and to kind of round off those edges. All right, so this is where our Instagram cake is at the moment. It's starting to look like the Instagram logo, but it still needs those finishing touches. So I've got my little pieces out of the fridge, and you're just gonna take your big lens. You want that big lens to sort of overlap the two different colors of brown, so it's sort of like popping up a little bit. And then you want your little flash. That's just gonna go right up in the top corner. Now you can take your Twizzlers, and we're gonna cut just a nice little section about that long of each of your Twizzlers, but the red one, the first one, goes right up against the edge, so you kind of need to, like, I guess, angle it off a little bit. You want those to finish right on the line of your Nutella, so if you've made a little bit of a mess of your line, this is a good way to be able to cover it up. And I'm just going to lay the Twizzler down, and then I'm going to cut on that angle so I get it just the right size. And then the green, and finally the blue. You could by rights leave that as it is, but I've put some of my leftover frosting into a Ziploc bag, and I'm just gonna cut another nice little tip off the end of it and just pipe kind of like a ring around that black lens, just so that I can make sure that it's, I guess, looking as much like the actual Instagram logo as possible. That is your finished Instagram cake, and I think it's pretty Instagram worthy. This guy I love, not just because it's rainbow inside, but because we've made it using just buttercream, Nutella, and some basic candies. Anyone can recreate this cake. If you're not already following me on Instagram, make sure you check it out. I love to post photos of not just things that I make, but things that I eat and things that I find in my travels that are sweets related. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure you do for 2 new videos every week. And as always, guys, thanks very much for watching.